all for making it out on a Saturday to come hear our discussion. As you know, IIDA is the professional organization for commercial interior designers and really advocating for the profession on a broad spectrum. The North Bay is a relatively new city center of our larger Northern California chapter, and so we're really grateful to have your support today. I want to thank our sponsors of the event. We have Callahan and Company. Thank you, Betty. We have Pat Craft is one of our event sponsors, Momentum, National Office Furniture, and then our top sponsor is Trope Group. So thank you very much for your dedicated support for this event. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Heather Mackin. I am the director of the North Bay City Center. I also wanted to thank our larger chapter patrons, which there is a long and healthy list of companies that are contributing to our larger chapter organization. And the full list of those patrons can be found on the IIDANC.org website if you would like to see who is contributing to the success of advocating for commercial interior design. So today, or this particular function is called our Spring Forum, and across the entire chapter, all of our city centers are doing a Spring Forum over the next over a span of about 6 weeks, right? And every year we pick an overarching theme, and this year's theme is Designing for the Future. And so each of the regions take a look at what is relevant for them in their region. And for us here in the North Bay, post-fire and what that's ultimately done for our economy, not just on a personal level, but really what's happening to the business environment here in the North Bay, things are changing, and things are going to have to continue to change to meet the demands of the economy and the workforces that are here and that we'll need to bring here. And so we have chosen to focus our talk on next generation workplaces, and that's why we're in this beautiful co-working space. I happen to work out of here and am super proud of this space and what's been created here and the community that is here. So I'm happy to have you guys here. So I also want to say that one of our missions is to select a philanthropy every year that we partner with, and that any fundraising that we do, we're doing on behalf of them, as well as advocating for our profession. So this year we've chosen the Petaluma Education Foundation, which is an organization, obviously here in Petaluma, that provides grants to schools for curriculum-based programs, and they also provide a lot of scholarships to graduating seniors. And I'm hoping that with our partnership with them, we might be able to create some scholarships for some design-focused students. So I'm super excited to partner with them. I would like to introduce Maureen Highland from PEF. She's their executive director, to tell us a little bit more about them before we move into our panel. So Maureen? Yes. And I'll say, Maureen just had another grandchild this morning.
Baby girl. So I apologize. I'm going to sneak out after my presentation because we're anxious to go meet her. So. First, let me just say that thank you, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm so proud that you guys have identified us as a partner in your efforts because it's incredible. I also want to thank Danielle for having us today. As someone who lives and works and has raised a family here in Petaluma, it's essential to keep going forward and providing the niches that everyone needs to be successful. And we are all, when we talk to schools, they're educating and training students for jobs that haven't been identified. So how cool is it, a place like this, where all those kind of things can come together? So thank you for hosting us. So, as I was introduced, my name is Maureen Highland. I have the incredible honor of being the executive director of the Petaluma Educational Foundation. We are a 38-year nonprofit 501c3 here in town. We support 38 TK through 12, public, private, and charter schools. So that's kind of my spiel right there. So really what we do with that is we bring community people, or communities together, businesses in our community, teachers, educators, administrators, and try and really fund the future. We don't get state or government funding. It really is, everything we've done is because of people, and so we love our people, and so now you are our people. So what we talked about when Heather and I met was that we do have our grant program, which is, something that has been incredible. We just gave out over $200,000 to our schools. They can apply for up to $15,000 per grant, and it's curriculum-based only. And the other side of that is also our scholarship program. And that seemed to be where maybe the most synergies kind of came to be in our conversation. That you guys, through your building for the future, our funding for the future, can help a future designer or someone in your industry get a kickstart. So we're gonna try and work together and create a scholarship in your name. And then you guys can set the criteria of who can apply for that and go forward with that. And you can come to our event every year and present it. So again, kind of celebrating what you guys are doing in our community as well. So the other thing I would just like to share with all of you is we have Alphabet Soup Benefit Thrift Store. And so that's another thing we talked about, that maybe over the course of the next several months, if any of you are around and want to wander through, we have 2 stores here in town. Last month they celebrated 25 years in business, selling donated items in the community. So the stores generate income that allow us to continue to support our mission. So there's lots of new opportunities for us, and I think with this creative mindset, kind of the sky's the limit. So thank you so much. If anyone had questions or wanted to know more about our program, I've left our grant brochure back there, our scholarship brochure, my cards, and please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to meet with you, share any information. And I'm just, again, so honored and so proud to be able to work with all of you in this way. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Now, I hope you get to go be a grandma.
I one last night, and he went to meet his sister, so now we're going to go down and meet his sister. So
Wonderful. Congratulations. So without further ado, I would like to get our discussion started. So our moderator today is Mindy Weichman. She's the design director from Studio O+A. You guys are in San Francisco, a renowned design firm with a lot of high-profile projects. And then we have Danielle Strobel, who is the community director and really the founder of Keller Street Co-work, this space, and really the mastermind behind what is here. I couldn't say more about her. Like, she's just fantastic. Karen Hines, I met quite a long time ago, right? And we've stayed connected. So Karen is with CBRE, and you have a long title. So you kind of do a lot of global move management and real estate work with large corporations, correct? Yeah. So, and then you also have a long title. Danielle O'Leary is with the city of San Rafael, and I'm going to say a little bit that you used to be the economic development manager for the city of Santa Rosa, and has now in close to 3 years with the city of San Rafael as the director.
Correct.
Yeah.
Economic development and innovation. So
Yes.
really trying
Thank
to look
you.
at ways to be human-centered in our service delivery.
Yeah.
That's the innovation part.
So I don't know how I didn't notice this before, but I'm super excited that it's all women here on our panel. So yay. Yay for powerful, strong women talking about design and new ways of working. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mindy to lead the conversation, and thank you very much for your time.
Right. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, IIDA North Bay, for having me here today. I'm super excited to lead the discussion. And today is meant to be very conversational. All of our lovely ladies, I think, will be doing most of the talking. If anyone has questions or things that you want to add along the way, please feel free to do so. We'll probably have a little section at the end where maybe we ask for questions, but I love conversations that really people feel free to interject along the way, so feel free to do that. So I think as Heather started, or as Heather noted in the beginning, I think the main topic of today is really about the future of workplace and kind of the growth of that in the North Bay. And so I think maybe just to kick off for, especially myself, not having a lot of knowledge about the economy in the North Bay, just kind of getting an understanding from you three, where does that stand today, and what does that kind of mean for what we need to be thinking about future planning?
We all have mics, right? I'll speak to that a little bit. What we've been doing here at Keller Street Co-work in conjunction with the Sonoma County Economic Development is really highlighting what independent working looks like, and obviously we're here to talk about design and how that is impacted as well, but I think we take I like how you said human-centered approach to the experience both here and what the people have here in Sonoma County. And we've been talking about the statistic about what's happening by the year 2030 and 50% of the population being independent workers, and how does that look, and how are larger companies preparing for that, not only economically but logistically and in their design and their spaces, and whether they're expanding into bigger spaces or whether they're partnering with spaces like what we have where they can bring teams and that type of thing. And from our perspective, that's a huge statistic to consider, and the impact and the experience and the way that people are working in Sonoma County especially. So that's something that we always kind of we filter everything through in terms of our discussions.
For me personally, I cover all of the Bay Area, so I'm in the car a lot, but I have really no office. So I might be in San Francisco one day, San Jose another day, Palo Alto or Oakland. And then I do have a co-working space in Santa Rosa, which I'm there about once a week. And then I'm in my home office when I've got to do sales calls or do any HR type issues. So I have to be completely mobile, and our company really embraces that ability to just go to an office you've never been to and just sit down and work. They've set it up so that there's more neighborhoods, and people tend to gravitate towards the same desk when they go in the office. I know I do. I try to get out of my comfort zone and go sit in a different neighborhood, but you find that people generally will gravitate towards the spaces they're comfortable in sitting in, people they know. Yeah.
So for me, I'd like to speak a little bit about just kind of the trends that I'm seeing both, in my role in Sonoma County and in my new role in Marin County. Sonoma County has about 485,000 people. Marin County has about 250,000 people. And there is a lot of interplay between the two counties that I didn't get to appreciate only serving in my role in Sonoma County. And that interplay is really in the creative space. Sonoma County has a great cluster of artistic creatives that are here dwelling, serving both Sonoma County clients, Marin County clients, and then San Francisco clients, Napa County. And so you've got a lot of movement that is occurring. And really what we're seeing with people coming from the city and moving in, kind of that first ring city really is San Rafael. And we've got this smart train and the connection between Petaluma and San Rafael. There's a tremendous amount of synergy possibilities in talent and pooling talent. And right now in Marin County, they are doing a kind of a countywide arts and creative plan. And we have over almost 2,000 creatives in interior design, film, graphic design, all clustered. And so what I really see is talent wants to be where talent is. And we both have these challenges, both in Petaluma and in San Rafael, of creating more spaces where that talent can come and be together, be able to conduct their work, but also create relationships and community that build off of new ideas. And so what is going on here, Danielle, what you've put together is ideal for that kind of situation. It's not just merely an office, but it becomes a bumping space for creative idea and collaboration. And that's what we're really seeing. I will say my phone rings quite a bit from businesses in San Francisco who have employees who are in Marin or in Sonoma County, and they're looking for satellite offices. They're looking for a way to create what you've created right here. And it doesn't always play out help because I don't think the design lens is really applied to as thoughtfully as it's been applied here. So those are kind of some trends I'm noticing is one, people wanting more space in the community to be professional beyond the coffee shop situation, and people wanting to forego their commute in the broader North Bay and be able to really work where they live, but provide those services and really the quality isn't compromised. So
I think it's really based on the type of work you're doing
Yeah.
as well, whether you can be remote or whether you have to be working within a team. CBRE does a lot of research. I mean, that's really what drives a lot of their business decisions and giving clients advice based on these surveys and research. One of the recent research they did last year was of occupiers, we call them occupiers, but they're tenants essentially. And really, over the next 3 years, they're looking to change from just a straight open plan space to more activity-based working environment, so that groups can, maybe one day they're all working in this environment here, but then they're working with a different team and they're going over there. I think for people migrating from the south up north, it's really got to be those maybe back office people or people that don't need to be in the technology hub, which is San Jose or San Francisco. But there's just no space in the city, so they're going to have to make some sort of shift somewhere, whether it's up north or some other state or whatever. But there's not enough space right now for all of the tenant requirements that we have. We have a lot of users looking for 100,000 square feet of space. A lot of tenants looking for that, and there's just no space. So they're going to have to make some decisions, I think, pretty soon. They're not going to be able to grow if they can't find a home. So it's either let's get them up here.
We have a few teams here in our space who, in co-working right now, there's a big focus shift on enterprise solutions, right, for this exact reason. And so how can we take the co-working model or the shared space model, keep it collaborative, keep it community-based, be able to bring teams of people together. So I have one great example of a team who's got an office in Palo Alto, and they've also got an office in Tokyo, but they have 7 team members that are based up here in the North Bay. And this is just one of a couple of teams that we have here where we've created a new solution that includes them in this kind of open environment, which does become very ambient active, right? There's a lot of movement happening. There's potentially a lot of conversation. But we've got spaces that are a little more private, and then you have desks where they can kind of just come together and work more focused, right? So I think to your point, it's like it's not just creating an open space, but it's creating different pockets in your space that allow for different energies or different types of working, and being able to give everybody access to all of those spaces as well. I mean, I'm a person, I have this the smallest little closet space here in the building, and I probably spend about 15% of my time in there. And what's really great is if, depending on what kind of work I want to do, I can sit here up at the front and potentially be a little more distracted and a little less focused, and whatever work I'm doing may or may not fit into that scenario. Or we can go into the lounge where it's a lot quieter and the lighting is different and the noise is a little bit different. But to your point, sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there. Co-working in general is starting to think about this enterprise solution because there is so much growth, especially here in the Bay Area. And, like you said, there's not much space in South Bay now, and definitely not in San Francisco. And, there's this entire other component of Sonoma County that I think a lot of us will agree is this desire to have a particular style of life, right? It's a lifestyle choice sometimes to come up to the North Bay. And so how can we meet the needs of workers and invite the workers that are outside of our county to come up here and get their stuff done and still have a decent lifestyle, to not have to drive 3,000 miles a month.
3,200.
To get their work done.
So I think all really great points, and something I just want to kind of build upon as, a room of designers thinking about how this may apply to what we're doing daily. I think both Danielle and Danielle, you hit on some really great topics about creating a place and creating an experience for workers. And I think earlier Heather gave me a fabulous tour of the space here, and I think it shows how thoughtful you've been in terms of doing that, and how flexible you've been able to be to kind of adjust to the needs of the people that are using the space. And I think that, for some businesses, the kind of monster WeWork situation is what they may need, but I think for a lot of others, it's not. And I would imagine, especially in the North Bay location, where it's just a smaller, more community type of feel, that this type of environment is more appropriate and welcoming. And so, what do you think are some attributes or experiences or things that you have done to tailor the environment to fit that? And then the same, Danielle, the people that are calling you and asking for space, what do you think they are looking for that would attract them to a co-working type of setting?
Well, I think I have to say first, this was a dream of mine, but would not have happened without a huge collaboration of a bunch of amazing people, designers included, and it was a huge learning process for me. My background is more on the business side of working, right? So I had a great team who was able to take a vision of mine and really make it a reality. What we have done here specifically is I was very intentional in creating different spaces. For me, it was the way to work, as I mentioned before, is that it just depends on the task you're doing or the type of work you do. It changes daily, not just career by career. So having different spaces that create different styles of energy for you to work, which includes different numbers of people, more soft seating versus more stiff seating, and couches and places where you can curl your feet up and work on your laptop, or you can sit upright and you can get more focused work done. We have spaces where people tend to go to socialize. So there's a conversation about productivity and whether or not open working is efficient or not, and there are opinions throughout the spectrum. So it's based on your experience, right? But there is this fact of when you change your space, when you change your focus, and you get these little micro breaks. And for Heather, for example, her micro break might be different than mine. For me, I tend to want to go, into a phone booth and and go like this for a minute. She may want to go into the kitchen and have a conversation with somebody. But we've designed spaces like that are comfortable, that are efficient, and that change. And there's some analog spaces that are available too. It's it's like trying to keep that that human element as well. I'm very passionate about community. So in a place like Sonoma County, Petaluma especially, you kind of get one chance to come into this town and nail it, and it's kind of I guess that's kind of an inside joke for Petaluma, but it's really everything that we do here, and it goes direct to the design of space as well, has to be focused on the community who's going to live in it, the community who's going to be productive in it, and who's going to turn out the work. And we can go into any space and do anything we want with a beautiful design, right? But if it doesn't fit the people who are going to be experiencing it, then it's kind of a miss. So while we built this space, that was top of mind every single day. How is so-and-so going to experience this space? And for me, personally, my priority is the human experience trumps all of it. So you're going to be a better worker, I think, if you're, if you're feeling like you're a good human too.
And I think the difference is, and you can attest to this in San Francisco, I mean, you don't have people riding their bikes unless they're, have a death wish, right? I mean, in San Francisco, it's just nuts. I mean, it's crazy. But I mean, the thing about this county is that you have to offer the open space. And that's something you can't get even in San Jose, and San Jose, San Francisco. So I would think that would be attractive to companies because it's becoming more and more a focus on health and wellness. for their employees, and that's definitely something that's hard to offer in the city unless it's something they build into their space, which is not something they want to do because space is so expensive up there. So cost cutting is the number one priority for most companies, and that's in part why they've gone to these open plan environments and sold them as, hey, it's actually, better for working in teams and stuff. People just go, I mean, the tech companies, they just sit there with their headphones on, right? There's no increase in social engagement, I think, just kind of overall. It's more of, okay, I'm sitting at my desk with the headphones on so I don't get distracted by what's going on, and then they need to build out, these one-to-one ratios of private space so people can actually decompress. So I think that's a big selling point for Sonoma County, that you can just walk out the door and just go grab a coffee, or you can get on your bike and ride around the block, or there's just a lot more in touch with nature here than there is in San Francisco. There's very little, right?
I'll say, just kind of, what do I hear from businesses who are calling and trying to set up space? I'm always curious at the spectrum of them. So I've had big financial companies that are doing financial advising, and they want a co-working space, but the requirements for them are they want private offices, and maybe they don't want it as colorful, and maybe they don't want it as hip, and those are their words, not mine, but just kind of describing how they want it to be when their client comes in. Then I have artists and creative in the film industry that are looking to just get some screen time, or a quiet sound booth, or we have people who are artists that are looking for something a bit more permanent. And in downtown San Rafael, we have artist housing, affordable housing, with their ability to have a storefront below. And we have huge artist in residency requests and things of that nature. And then we also see more of like our manufacturers, advanced manufacturing, so EO products that does a bunch of lotions. They're really trying to create more of spaces so that their work-life balance for their employees, if they could house them on site, that would be something they'd be going to. But I'd say the one thing they all have in common is they pretty much are asking about mobility and central business district. Do you have spaces that are in a central business district? Do they have amenities such as coffee and restaurants and places to go for people to have entertainment when they're done with work? And what are the ways in which they can get to you? Do you have train service? Do you have transit options? And if so, what are they? Kind of what is your bike and pedestrian plan? Those are actually a lot of questions that we get. And I'm always surprised by it because I just kind of want to jump into the details of the space and where it is. But there's a lot of amenity questions and really trying to understand what those are first. And then I think they go into the detail of how they build out the space accordingly.
So you all three kind of hit on exactly that, and this idea of placemaking and how really important that is to not only an urban core environment, but small communities as well. And to be able to provide those amenities and those decompression spaces outside of the actual workspace. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you feel, Petaluma specifically, or the North Bay, or Sonoma County is doing to support that idea of placemaking. So aside from true workplace or co-working areas, what other type of development may be attractive, or what are those pieces or what are those amenities that already exist that you could use as a selling point to drive business here?
I think just all the parks that we have, there's just an enormous amount of open space. You just don't have that there's zero in San Francisco.
We have this giant parking garage next door, which is like a sight for sore eyes, but it's so funny because every time somebody calls, and there are probably 5 questions that consistently come when somebody wants to either find a space to work or a space to do an event, which we do here as well. And one of those 5 questions is always parking, right? So even just in a town like here, and having a parking garage that's, I think, 4 levels, right? 4 levels, is an amenity in itself. We can provide all kinds of great stuff, but if people can't, park and get to us, they get really annoyed really quickly. So, that's a good one for Petaluma, I think.
I would say, just in visiting Petaluma as much as I have, it's your public art that you have going on and around the community is really amazing, and it just creates this sense of personality and moxie that I love. And you can tell there's a sense of community pride here, just driving through it, walking around it, spending time in it. Creating those outdoor kind of public spaces, walking along the riverfront, walking along in the downtown and the coffee spaces. People really are searching for experience. They want experience. It's moving from beyond transactional purchasing at a retail store, and why that might be part of the experience. It isn't driving that kind of sole reason to visit. So brew pubs and all the restaurants that you're picking up, and a lot of San Francisco restaurateurs are coming up here and moving and making great restaurants. It's those kinds of things. Music scene, art. San Rafael, we applied for to be considered a cultural arts district, one of the states, one of 14, and we were awarded of, and part of that was from the density of artists we have in our area. And you know what makes me sad is we need to do a better job of making it feel like an arts district, and in Petaluma I instantly feel like I'm in an arts district. So I want to commend you on creating such a welcoming place that really people want to spend their time. And I think that is one of the things from an economic development perspective that is very, very important in placemaking, in talent attraction, but also talent retention. Because you want those clusters, and people don't want to move somewhere where they're isolated, and if that job does not work out, they have no other opportunity there for them.
Karen, do you think that that's something, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there is the lifestyle aspect that it can attract people, workers up here, but we don't have the housing. It's definitely less expensive to live here than San Francisco, so it's a step in the right direction, but there's so many systemic aspects to this topic that building a beautiful space is, and actually you mentioned this, is sort of, that's, maybe it's if you build it, they will come, but if they don't have a place to live, then we're driving, and now we're not helping the environment with our long commute, fossil fuel burning. So this is such a big topic, and I mean, I'm really excited that we're touching on these things, and I'm happy to be here. I just think that we need to address big companies as well as the independent workers. How do we get the talent up here? Because we do have some space. We have some open space for buildings. We have some unoccupied space. We need to fill it. It's a waste of resources to have empty spaces. So anyway, thank you.
I just want to touch on that from my perspective of kind of feeling that talent barrier wall up in my work in Santa Rosa. It's really the feedback I got from people either considering moving companies. It's really the clustering, right? What industry clusters do we have? And it's hard for some of these larger businesses to go kind of stake out and be that pioneer in that space and say, okay, well, I'm going to open up this 300 employee company, fill in the blank for whatever it is, unless I know that there are other companies similar around me that are offering this, and there's a talent pool in which I can share and draw from. And so that's really where, from an economic development perspective, that awareness building of mapping and all your assets, what's here? What clusters do we have here already? And how do we work? How are they doing? Are they growing? How do we see them grow? And how do we bring in those companies that match well with them? Like the apparel industry and kind of that there was a cluster of that here. There's health and wellness. And so I think it's really working to grow what's here and build on those clusters to bring in like-minded companies instead of maybe one big company that doesn't have that connection to the ecosystem of what's here.
Yeah, and I agree. And we have like a really strong food industry
You
here.
do.
And
Yeah.
that's growing, and I think it's attracting other organic and natural food companies to continue to stay here and grow.
Absolutely.
So
This was something actually we touched on quite a bit in our phone call. Remember, the four of us had a call last week or the week before and kind of brainstorming on the topic. And this was a large part of that discussion, exactly what Mary just pointed out, is that it's not just the independent workers. We definitely, and in Sonoma County, this has been for a while where it's been a conversation of talent acquisition, like how do we get the talent up here? Now, to speak to Heather's point, what kind of started this conversation with the fires, and now we've got lack of inventory of places to live as well. It is, as you mentioned, it's kind of this big kind of circle of like, which problem do we solve first, or how do we solve bits of all of those problems at the same time, and how does that look, and where do we even start?
I think with Google, weren't they requiring them to build a certain amount of housing with their developments? And maybe that's, something with new developments in Sonoma County that, if a big company does come up here, they're also building housing and helping with the road infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think, also to Mary's point, just thinking about design from a residential aspect as well. I mean, I think, consumers are becoming so much more savvy in terms of just their design aesthetics. And so making sure that if we're building beautiful workspaces, yes, that's one piece of the puzzle, but who is focusing on also building residences that are attractive to people that, may be living in a brand new condo in San Francisco and want to move here and not have to go through rebuilding something or renovating something or whatever that may be. And is there any type of, development like that that's happening? And I also see that you had a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, we had a panel discussion last year that was more around housing, so it speaks to this. And I think, having grown up out here and moved to the city and come back, I personally, I live in a house, but I understand the kind of want to live in more of an urban place where things are walkable. I feel like there's a real resistance to that in this community out here. So there's got to be, and I don't know from an economic standpoint how we would bridge that gap, but I think logically, like places like Railroad Square where the SMART train stops will be a great place to kind of build these condos and have really nice stores and have that feeling that would attract some of these people coming from the cities. You can still go out to the parks, but some of those people don't want to have their house. They don't want to maintain their garden. They want to, get some food from one of the farms, or you know what I mean? So there's I get that. I like that. I think that's what's going to attract people. I'm not sure how to convince this community that that's the right thing to do.
Well, to add to that, I think, climate change is a very, very big deal, and it is polling more and more on the minds of voters. And at a state level, there are mandates coming down through to cities that are really going to have to cause a change in the development patterns that we have. And so single-family residents, it's not that they're going away, but really there is state incentives to refocus into city-centered growth that leverages transit systems, walkability, and all the things that we're kind of talking about here today. So I'm imagining it's going to be a combination of both the community wanting it, but also regulation helps shift those development patterns in the new trajectory that they're going to go. And we're just only beginning to understand what those are. I mean, there's a new calculation called VMT, vehicle miles traveled, that is going to be a principal requirement in how future development is done. And at a local level, we're grappling what does that mean and how does that change development patterns? And what I can see on the outside just beginning to grasp that term is it's driving city-centered, walkable growth. That's where we need to move towards. It doesn't mean that the stock we have in single-family residence goes away, but future investment is really around trying to build those city, job, work and housing centers. And that's really where I see the trends going. And when I'm getting these calls from companies, it's matching that's the goals they're trying to find in their new place. Right? And so I'm seeing it in regulation coming down from the state. I'm hearing it from business owners and what they're looking for. And I think we're just only beginning to really start to feel what that looks like. And Petaluma is in a great place as far as its proximity to the SMART train. I know many people who commute from Marin County up here and have offices. They could choose to have offices in downtown San Rafael, but they're choosing Petaluma to be here. So really trying to leverage that SMART transit investment, I think, is something as two counties we should really be focusing on more.
100% agree with that. In fact, that's been a focus of mine since we've opened as well, and just in terms of like getting bodies into the space. I've had this kind of tiered version in my head of, getting people in. Obviously, you start local and you really want to take care of the local community, but the SMART train has always been on my mind. And like, she mentioned Railroad Square, that right there is like, in fact, I went to Railroad Square one day and I sat on the train platform and I kind of did that whole experience of what it's like to be from there to here, like literally what was the walk from our train station. And I find as well, there's so many people who are thinking in that way. It's like, how can I commute differently? How can I stay within for the topic of this conversation, within Sonoma County? And actually, having said that, we talk a lot about Sonoma County. We should be talking about North Bay, because I think there is a huge attachment between, the us and them of Sonoma and Marin. And so I would love to see those lines blurred. But definitely tapping into the SMART train, because that's what we have now. And for us, it may not be amazing for people going from Santa Rosa to San Francisco, but for people coming, from Santa Rosa to Petaluma and to San Rafael, it's a pretty sweet thing that we should really try and, tap into more than we have.
Karen, is there anything that you see kind of the CBRE family doing to promote some of these ideas that we're talking about, or how are some of the brokers, just in terms of when they're going out to clients or trying to promote spaces, are there things that they're selling or doing or saying that are helping, or are there other things that we can be helping them also do, I guess, to promote the North Bay in general?
CBRE recently kicked off something called Hannah. We have Hannah, and then we have Host. Hannah is like a co-working. It's a competition basically with WeWorks, and so they've just started rolling that out, and they're starting to open more and more facilities. And that's really to support the brokers when they've got smaller clients that just don't want to pay, to have a space built out. They just want to move in and get to work. So CBRE is really growing that co-working space business. So I see that really taking off. I mean, it's been pretty well received. It's very different than WeWorks, and it's a little bit more traditional office space, versus WeWorks can tend to be a little bit funky depending on what office you go to. I mean, they cram people in there like sardines. It's like, geez, the fire department's going to show up and nobody's going to be able to get out of here. I mean, I was in there and I was like, whoa, this is like, excuse me. So that's not the CBRE is really, more, probably something more similar to this, where it's more spacious and open. And so they are looking to do that to accommodate those sort of in-between clients. Yeah. But, we've got so many clients looking for, very large chunks of space. And I've seen a few of the brokers, I've seen some signs up here, but it's more on the retail side. And it would be interesting to have, like, Sonoma County, Marin County, actually meet with those brokers to say, here, we have a proposition. We've actually had people from LA come up and pitch our San Francisco team about, hey, if your client wants to get out of town, come down to LA. Well, I don't see why we shouldn't be doing that here, and pitching to the San Francisco brokers to say, you can't find space for your client? Come on, you can get your commission up here. So I think there's a good opportunity there. And I don't know, is there any outreach that's done to either brokerage firms or developers for large-scale projects?
The state has a Office of GoEd. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's economic development at a state level. And what they will do is send out these kind of calls for larger spaces that then all of the economic developers in their roles in different cities or counties will then reach out to their broker base, or they should, and be saying, hey, do we have space for this client? So there's that. But as far as marketing for individual businesses, for me, I can speak, it's mostly responding to inbound requests, and then certainly looking at my existing clusters and saying to them, who in the supply chain would help to have them be here for you? And then I will go and try to recruit that. So maybe I kind of try to farm what's there and see if I can build off that relationship and that already kind of mutual respect that they may have with that person or industry, and try to bring them here. I've done the old-fashioned kind of like, here's my brochure and go to the trade shows. Those are a bit harder. It could just be me. Maybe I'm shy and I'm not the best marketer, but I've handed out my cards, and they'll result in a phone call or two, but I find really having that like personal connection, I get further in relocating and helping businesses. And I work a lot with our local broker community. What are they seeing? What kind of information can I supply them? When they come into the planning counter, like, is this permitted here? What would that look like? What's the permitting time? And so that also helps too. Is when someone is coming in on a city side, we intercept that and say, welcome, and here's how you go about getting started. That is a big, I think, thing for cities to help.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just, we are obviously touching briefly on the broker community, but they serve as such a huge link in all of this, and really need to kind of be some of the out of the box thinkers to be able to bring some of these more unique ideas to potential clientele that may not be able to think outside of the box themselves. So I think, you use the word promoting, which I think is a great term, and just thinking about how to do that more. I don't know if you feel that there's anyone in the community that's doing that well, or maybe there needs to be more of it, but.
I think my question is does Sonoma County want the growth? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Answer to
That's a
that,
fair
but are they welcoming, would they welcome a big development like a mixed use type project?
I think they already have, right? Up in Rohnert Park even, there's a giant project happening in Rohnert Park. They're building their downtown right off of the train station. And it's actually speaking to that exactly. It's the live work. It's an interesting project. I've spoken in depth with the developer, and I think, that, it's speaking to the whole design concept. And actually, I would be curious about your opinion on that particular project, Mary. But you kind of trying to bridge that gap between like making these developments and speaking to the people of Sonoma County, yet inviting South Bay and there's no secret that I think the wants and needs and style of people who are living up here in Sonoma County might differ from what's down in the South Bay, right? Yet we're trying to tap into that. And we want to, we're here, we all speak about design. I'm not going to lie, design is important to me, and my aesthetic is important as well. And as we start thinking about a project like Rohnert Park, like what's happening there, does that fit in with what's happening here in Sonoma County from a design perspective? Is it answering all the questions that we're talking about, walkability, commute, retention and acquisition of talent? And those are things that sometimes I personally feel a little bit frustrated in, that I think, like, we're an ecosystem, as you've mentioned, and there's economic development, and there's commercial, and there's the lifestyle of the workers, and there's design, and in a dreamy world, everybody would speak to each other. I'm not 100% sure that always happens, but I think, baby steps. So I'm curious, though, Mary, just on that project in particular, what your thoughts are.
Well, thank you for asking. I wanted to talk about the one, because that had me thinking in one direction. There was something that Danielle said. One thing I want to say as a point of awareness, in what the work I do, until today, I probably wasn't very clear on how the economic development directors that work for various governing agencies do interface with the private sector. And so this is good news. I mean, the idea that someone would come to you and say, hey, I'm looking for space is totally beyond me. I didn't know that. I would think they would go to the broker. So does the broker come to you? So
it's usually a combination. Sometimes businesses are, so it can be two ways that I've seen. Sometimes a business is just beginning cursory and they don't really want to invest in a broker yet in that relationship. They're just kind of Are you even interested? Do you have square footage? Sometimes there's already a broker there, and we're working on facilitating the lead with the broker. And the facilitation part really is around the permitting, right? Like, is this zoned correctly? How long is it going to take to get my zoning clearance, go through any discretionary public review, and then get through the building department? That's kind of where we can help aid the broker in being that key ambassador out on the ground game, trying to recruit people, whether it be retail or industrial or just like office space. So that's really where I view my role, is I intersect those two parties very well, and I help provide them with, here's our demographics, here's our sales information, here's our neighborhoods, here's some brokers if you need to contact and you don't have one. And you know, another part of the ecosystem we haven't mentioned here today, but is certainly big in Sonoma County, and I played a role a little bit in Marin County with it, is the cannabis sector. And so a lot of people talk about, oh, well, with cannabis, you know, it's really just in the revenue from the sale of cannabis. But what we're missing here behind that story is it's not just about that. It's about an entire industry coming online and all the services that that industry needs. Architects, human resource, creative designers. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about onboarding an industry. And so I can say, kind of give you an example of what we did in San Rafael recently. Was that was completely prohibited. I met with that industry. I met with all the trades groups. We brought together a plan, and we brought that forward to City Council, and now that is going through it. And just like Danielle does here with the studio, I am constantly refining the regulation to match what's going on in the ecosystem. A good economic developer knows what's going on in their ecosystem, and they're making refinements and changes along the way, because the rules change, the rules are complex, and just like we talked about with VMT earlier and the vehicle miles traveled in transit, if I've got rules that are based towards older suburban development patterns, that's gonna crash when it comes through planning. So my job really is to say, where's the obstacle? What are you experiencing? And how can I try to help both my city team and the person coming through the process? So those are ways that economic developers can make a difference in the community, but I will tell you, it's a nebulous title, and most people go, what do you work on? What would you say you do? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I was just I won't take much time, but in regards to the Rohnert Park project, a mixed-use development, it was the old State Farm campus, gigantic campus, and they're densifying it. And, you know, aside from the architecture, which I don't want to talk about, the concept, you know, mixed use, it's good. Transit-oriented development is good. Mix of housing is good. Trying to create a town center in Rohnert Park has always been a major challenge, and there's no there, as they say, and so maybe this will be a there. My work has been with another project in Rohnert Park, which is the old Hewlett-Packard campus, which is now Sonoma Village. And that's really a challenge because it's lots of square footage. There's available square footage, but it is isolated. Yeah. You know, so they're trying to create a center in a big rural, an open field, essentially. Mm-hmm. What I like about the project is it's repurposing an already built facility, and that's responsible development, I think. Absolutely. So I don't know if that answers my your question on how I feel about that mixed-use project.
It does, yeah. More in the back of my mind, I'm like, yes. Same page.
I guess I wanted to bring this back to designers and to this industry. And, you know, I'm hearing that there's so much work up front to even get a business here or to grow an entire industry here. But really, how can designers then help along the way? At what point is, you know, all of us have been, you know, at some level you're either, you know, coming into a project with a business or with a broker, or, you know, you have been working on it a long time before design actually happens. At what point is the best place in the North Bay to get involved as designers? At what point are designers going to have the biggest influence to help identify what types of spaces should be designed for a particular type of business or industry. Like, where is that? Do you see that? And is there an opportunity there for the design community to really partner in, an untraditional way for the North Bay, certainly. I mean, that kind of collaboration might be happening in more urban centers, but here in the North Bay, it definitely is
It's
not.
happening too late in the process.
It's happening way too late in the process. And so where is that opportunity that the design community really can offer some expertise?
Do you want me to? Start?
Go ahead.
You
Well, I was just going to say the availability of design resources is probably much greater in Sonoma County than it is in San Francisco, right? To get a project actually completed from start to finish, wouldn't you say?
I wouldn't say that.
No?
No,
You think it takes
no.
longer? Are you guys,
Oh, you mean to
like-
build
You mean actually
something?
building?
to actually design
process
design?
time?
No,
Yes.
I say there's
Process.
I would say- I would guess
gigantic
it's
design
less.
industry
Yeah,
in San Francisco.
yeah.
But I know it takes a long time to get projects
I
done.
think probably
Get
more the
through
city,
design
the
process.
city process.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
city
what
So
review
a
process.
speed to
Yeah.
market?
Gotcha. Yeah.
As we did on the,
I
we did the
mean,
Keysight project. We did that
I
thing.
really view the design community as like the laboratory of democracy in some way. You're showing the government what you can do in ways that we, as regulators, it's a bit harder to be that creative alchemist. And so by creating this space right here and the community you're building and showing like what can be done, and then bringing those elected officials and bringing city staffers to here to show what can be done and that it's actually working and is thriving, that's really a great amount of help. And that's more in the front end, right? Because you're instigating and creating in the space you have control over. You're bringing people in there to see how you're doing it, to show them the way, and to be a resource for them. And that stays with us. And as we go back and we start seeing projects come through, it's like, you know what, it could be done this way, or it could be done this way, or have you thought about reaching out to this group? So really getting the design community's values and what you want to see on the awareness radar of local government would be my suggestion as a good place to start. And it's easy to say and show a picture, but when you come into the space, it's a totally different thing, right? We can feel it. And I think that then goes back with that official and inspires them to look at projects and things in a different way that hopefully will start creating some of the things that you want to see happen.
I mean, I think that's so important, and that's that is like the kind of icing on the cake in terms of like all of everything that has been happening here, and not just with my space. I mean, this type of space is not new, and it's happening everywhere, but it's making those connections. It's inviting people to see, like, look at what we did in this amount of time, and we did it, and we worked with all of these different agencies, and we were able to do that. But as an association, designers can make the connections with, for example, Danielle and in Sonoma County, the same thing, and you're kind of building these unofficial partnerships so that you have your expertise, they have their expertise, we're making a great team. She's probably going to have the information, right at hand next time somebody comes to her and says, this is what we want to do, and this can be rolled into that process. I mean, it comes down to just making those connections, I think, for now, until it can become something that's like.
I think cost is a big factor too. I mean, it would be an attractive thing for a lot of people who are looking in San Francisco that maybe don't necessarily need to be there. I think the cost of space, the cost to build it out, I mean, I know, for instance, I was looking for jobs when I first moved up here, and I was like, whoa, that's like half what I was making in the South Bay. So it's definitely the cost is cheaper up here. So I think advertising that, like finding a way to get out there and have those discussions, whether it's with brokers or networking with like Coronet, those, going through those organizations and just making connections, or video. I know there's a lot of interest in having video content. So, maybe it's about your space, right? Here, show me, look at my space, put it out on YouTube, share it with brokers, share it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's huge. I mean, we do a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. Getting the message out. I think it's just people don't really know about it. They don't know really what they have up here. and how good it could be and how cost effective it could be and how much faster it could be done.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to add my own 2 cents to this as part of this, part of the panel. I think, you know, in San Francisco, I feel, and maybe this is more so O+A or just speaking from the my O+A knowledge, I think there are certain things that if we see a need or see something that we're interested in, that we just insert ourselves. And I think that that is something I would recommend to the design community here. If you're not already doing that, do more of that. I think whether it be just going to events or meeting with public officials or meeting with brokers, but making sure that, you know, the rest of the community is aware that you are a partner that's there to help make change. And you know, if you have had any design teams that have done that, I'm assuming it's been successful. I think it's something that it takes more effort, and it's almost more of the marketing side of our design business. And so it may seem a little untraditional or a little scary if someone doesn't really have experience doing that. But I would say, you know, just speaking from our experience, that's where we've made some of our best client connections, is where we've seen either a target market or a target client or even just a general project in the city, and we will say we want to be part of that. Like, let's figure out how to make that happen. And I think doing that sooner rather than later is something that's also really important and can help kind of support this idea of promotion that we've been talking about. I think sometimes, you know, brokers or developers miss that whole human connection, and I think that design teams really help make that human connection. So promoting something with the human experience related to it, I think, is going to go a lot further than just talking about, you know, the real estate facts of something. So,
you know, an interesting question would be, maybe for Danielle, is that so as a designer, if I wanted to know further, like closer at the beginning of the process. What am I saying? Process. Hello. Project is where I was going with that. Like, I want to know about a potential project that's going to happen in Rohnert Park to build out a downtown or something like that, and I want to be involved earlier on. Where do designers and other industry workers as well, but where do they get that information before it's not too late to get involved with that project?
Usually, one of the best ways is it's a bit cumbersome and can be kind of boring, but is really to sign up and track agendas, your city council agendas in the communities that you care about. And every other week, there's going to be a council agenda that comes out, and you want to peruse it and just see what items are on there. There's consent calendar items, which are really things that aren't going to be publicly talked about unless someone from the public shows up and says, I want to talk about that item. They're typically more routine, but they're like contract awards or things of that nature. And then there's usually kind of like staff items that are more substantial, and there can be a public hearing. At that point, you're going to start seeing at a design review level, maybe the first blush at a project that's just starting to take shape, or you're going to look at planning commission for a project that has started to take shape and is now trying to go through entitlements, or you're going to be looking at city council's agenda for maybe some of those bigger policy setting discussions, you know, like how do we plan for our downtown? I know Santa Rosa is having that discussion right now and inviting the community to be a part of it. Not everybody can be a part of it on the times that it's available, right? We have other work commitments, maybe we have family. So trying to find what's your way to be a part of it, whether that's joining a committee or actually going to the meeting that night, or just writing and reaching out to your elected official or the staff person there, offer to take them to coffee. Because I often worry people get discouraged, well, I can't sit there from 7 to 9 at night or 7 to 11 at night, so I just can't express my opinion. There are other ways that you can reach out to your city government to let them know how you feel about something, and that's all part of public records. So I think tapping into maybe the communities you're interested in, and definitely from a design perspective, you want to look at design review board agendas and you want to look at planning commission agendas. And then city council is kind of those bigger, meatier policy items, or if a project gets appealed and then it's going to city council for their ultimate deliberation. Does that help?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
That's great.
I was just going to say, do we want to kind of wrap it up? And yeah, I mean, I'll let you guys finish up. And
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone has any last, questions they want to get in. If you guys have any kind of closing remarks that you want to make, I think it's been a really great conversation. I feel like we've covered a broad range of things. Hopefully, everyone is able to walk away with a bit of something new. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just to kind of circle back on some things that Bianca mentioned and also Mary mentioned, most of us in the room are in the commercial enterprise, so really caring about commercial space and in a lot of situations, larger enterprise. And I've always had this sort of anxiety, frankly, about some of the larger enterprises that are located in the North Bay leaving. And so retention being a big concern, and a feeling that as a designer with the choices they make about their space and its location and what they do on the interior, how is that going to impact their ability to attract talent and then ultimately to stick around in the North Bay. And some of the things I was hearing Karen saying as far as the costs are concerned are that, there is such a, I guess our number one attraction point would be our outdoor space, but also the fact that we've got real estate that is at prices you can't touch in the city or the South Bay. So, is it an inevitability that we're going to see growth from clients in the South Bay and San Francisco coming up here? Or do we have substantial hurdles in the way of that?
I think, Sonoma County is unknown, really. I mean, I think if somebody's looking at San Francisco and they say, okay, there's no space, but I still need 100,000 square feet. Okay, let's look at Austin. I mean, that's a huge, there's a lot of activity going on there. So I think there really does need to be a lot more marketing about Sonoma County to say, hey, you don't need to go to another state. Just move up north. Right? So I've talked to, Jay Paul. I was talking to a guy over there, and I said, what about Sonoma County? And he kind of went, I didn't really thought. He goes, I want to buy a house up there. And I said, perfect, build a project out here.
I think from a county level, Sonoma is literally just kicked off in January, I think, is when they kicked off their Life Opens Up campaign, which is national, right? And it speaks to that, where they've realized at a county level, like, we just need to let people know what we are, and they've done it from a design perspective. Actually, they've done it in a way that is not just about weddings and wine, which is great. Like I saw there were a lot of, actually in the video, there were a lot of photos around Petaluma, which was great. But to your point, you're right. I think Sonoma needs to start screaming from the rooftops, hey, look, we've got all this space. Bring your people, bring your business. I don't know from a municipality level how difficult that is in terms of a company relocating or moving up to Sonoma County. I can't speak to that intelligently, but
I think it's more about expansion. I mean, companies, there's just no space to expand. If they end up moving their back of the house people up here, they don't need to be in San Francisco. And they don't want to be in San Francisco because they're not getting paid enough to live in the city. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I just wonder, some of the cultural dynamics that Bianca was talking about. I've lived in Sonoma County almost 25 years, and I love it here. But I think there's a lot of folks who have, maybe come to the North Bay, and then once they're here, it's like, okay, shut the door. Yeah. Don't let anybody else in because I like it the way it is. But
I would definitely agree with that, and it's something that we have to be aware of. And I don't think it is an automatic, actually. I think that San Jose, Silicon Valley, I mean, we're comparing now with other regions that are drawing talent away. Younger people can't afford to be here. We have to figure out the housing stuff. We have to, or there's going to be some serious repercussions. And I get it all the time in Marin as well. It's, we're good. We're good. It's nice. We're good, but we're not good. Because ultimately, if you turn into a retirement community, you don't have the workforce that can keep your community vibrant. And this infrastructure all around costs money, and it takes money to maintain it. And you want to be able to have multiple generations enjoy the community that you live in. And so I think for me, I really feel we have to know our ground game and be really good at it. And we need to know what our clusters are, and we need to know how they're doing, and we need to know what their labor pool is and how are they doing. And do we have universities that are creating that labor pool for the future for them or not? And if we don't, we need to start working on programs for them and looking at all angles of the housing spectrum. You know, it's not just single family residents anymore. What are we doing about transit? What are we doing about the environment? And I think when we treat what we have here well and it starts really thriving, that emanates and brings people in more than trying to pull a big person out. And I mean, we've had all sorts of like rumors go up and down about the Birkenstock property in Novato, and oh, it's gonna be Google, it's gonna be Google. It's like, I've heard that now for 5 years, and it's still for lease. So I really feel like working with our existing companies, what do they need? What are their hurdles? Where are they struggling? And how can we improve those struggles are most important in game-changing having people come up, because we really, I mean, Sonoma County has a critical mass of people here and jobs that are here. I think there was over 185,000 in the MSA area of jobs, and it's significant. This is a big economy, and I don't think we give ourselves enough credit, and partially it's because we feel so spread out, and it's not pulled in tighter so you can feel that density. So I would really be working on the margins, what we have here, making sure they're doing good, that they aren't going anywhere, and how do we grow that? And one of the best ways to grow that is where are they doing business and with who? And is that supply chain company maybe getting priced out of San Francisco and they could be here closer to the business that they're supplying and still service San Francisco? Awesome.
Thank you very much.
You have a good you have a good chance.
Close.
Sure. Thank you so much to all of you. It's really, great conversation. Thank you.